All right, welcome back to the Burnzo Cast. Again, this is episode number 7. It's called I'm Dreaming of Dream Machine. And you have no idea what I'm doing right now. Hold on, let me try that again. Okay, so you have no idea what I'm doing right now. It's going to become a little clearer a little bit further into this episode what I'm doing right there. I'll give you a little hint. It's a character from the X-Men video game. So that's, just a little teaser right there. Excellent. Let's go. What else do I got? Reload. Okay. All right, I'm getting a little loopy right from the outset of this episode here. Hold on, let me try that again. Reload. Reload. Eat lead, cupper. Don't shoot. Help me. Reload. Okay, so basically what I'm doing right now is just a bunch of sound effects from the video games we're going to be talking about in this episode of the Burnzo Cast. So, a little history about the Dream Machine Video Arcade. It was actually established in 1973. And I'm not really sure about this. I did some research on the internet, and it looks like the first Dream Machine was in the Hampshire Mall in Hadley, Massachusetts. I'm not really sure about that. I can't find exactly where the first Dream Machine was. It's difficult to find on the internet. So if anybody out there listening to this knows where the first Dream Machine was, I'd really like to know that. But it looks like it may have been at the Hampshire Mall in Hadley, Massachusetts. And then it eventually spread across the Northeast into several locations, usually in shopping malls. I do know for a fact that the Dream Machine, there was one location in Hull, Massachusetts, right along Nantasket Beach. I don't think I ever went to that one, but there was one other one, and that was in the Walpole Mall in Walpole, Massachusetts. And that's the one that I went to as a child. So that's the one I'm going to be focusing on right now. So prior to 1992, I believe. Now, it says on the internet that the Walpole Mall Dream Machine opened in 1988. I don't think that's correct at all. I'm pretty sure from my memory that the Dream Machine opened in 1992 in the Walpole Mall. Because prior to that, I didn't have any video arcades that I could actually go to as a child. The only arcade, there were sporadic video games here and there at various restaurants like Papagino's, Pizza Hut. Like the bowling alley would have some video games there, and just like random places that you go to might have a video game. But the only video arcade I remember going to prior to 1992 was this place called the Barn of Fun, way out on Cape Cod in Dennisport, Massachusetts. And that was part of a miniature golf course called something. I don't know. We just always called it the Barn of Fun. I'm not sure if that was what the miniature golf course was called or if that was what the arcade was called. That's the only, and that was a really cool arcade from what I remember. I don't know how many times I actually went there. I was very young. This was like the 1980s. So I was about, 7 or 8 years old, 6 years old even at the time. But it was a really cool arcade. And that's the only one I remember going to as a child until 1992. So I was I guess I was 10 years old at the time. In 1992, Dream Machine opened in the Walpole Mall. And let me try to give you an idea of what it was like going to the Dream Machine in the Walpole Mall circa 1992. The Walpole Mall today is basically a dead mall. There's really not many stores. It's kind of alive on the outside. It turned into more of an outdoor mall. But the inside of the mall still kind of exists as, like the atrium indoor part with it used to have like the fountains inside and the benches and all the various stores inside. That part is mostly all closed. They turned it into bigger stores like a Petco or something and a Kohl's. But there is still a small part of the indoor atrium mall of the Walpole Mall that exists today. It was never a big mall, but it was a bigger mall than it is today, especially on the inside. So let me just give you an idea of what it was like going to the Dream Machine. When we went to the Walpole Mall, we'd always kind of park at the Bradleys. And so we would enter via the Bradleys. And Bradleys was like a department store I don't think it exists at all anymore, but it was kind of like a Target, or it was like a Kmart type place. That was the one anchor store at the mall. So we would enter via Bradley's, and then you would enter from Bradley's the indoor part of the mall, the atrium part. On the left, there would be a Radio Shack, and on the right, there was a Newport Creamery. And then on the left, there was this place called Tobacco Road. They sold a bunch of cigars and tobacco products there. That was there forever, but it's gone now. Then on the right, there'd be a record store called the Record Town. That was a cool record store back in the day. Actually, it was overpriced, but that's another story. You'd walk further down the mall. Basically, you'd be going north in the mall, I guess. And there'd then be a KB Toys on your right. There'd be a CVS on your left. Then you would eventually get to a turn in the mall, and there was a place called Joann's Fabrics there at the turn. That was almost like an anchor store in the mall. That's where you would get all your sewing supplies and fabrics and stuff. Also, at that turn in the mall, there was a Auntie Anne's pretzel stand. But while you were making that turn, that's when you would start hearing the various video games from the Dream Machine, which was just a little further down. So you'd make that turn and you'd start hearing those sounds from the video games. And then you'd keep walking down. There was a Papagino's on your right. There's probably some other stores I don't remember, but on the left, you would eventually come to the Dream Machine. And I think it was before like a Walden Books or something like that. But I just wanted to kind of give you that little image in your mind of hearing those video game sounds from the distance and how exciting it was to start hearing those sounds, especially from a distance, and you were getting close to the Dream Machine. So yeah, it was 1992 when I first went to the Dream Machine. That's when it opened, I'm pretty sure, even though the internet says 1988. I'm almost positive it was around 1992. And the first video game that I actually remember playing there was Mortal Kombat. Actually, my first exposure to Mortal Kombat was not at the Dream Machine. It was at this restaurant called The Rebel in Walpole, Massachusetts. And The Rebel was kind of like a towny type of a restaurant. It was named after the Walpole High School sports team, which was the Rebels. One weird thing that I remember about the Rebel restaurant is that it had red quarters. There were quarters that were painted red. And I always used to think that this was just something that the Rebel restaurant used to do because the Rebel colors for the high school sports team was red and blue. And actually the flag for the team was the Confederate flag. So they stopped using that flag at a certain point, but they've since actually changed the team name to the Timberwolves. That's a whole nother story that I won't get into. But anyway, the team colors were red and blue and white or something like that. So I always thought the Rebel restaurant painted their quarters red, for the team colors. But it turns out I just saw on the internet recently that a lot of places painted their quarters red because they would use their own quarters to constantly feed into the jukeboxes in their restaurants and other business establishments. And when the vendors came to collect the money from the games, I guess the vendors that were renting out these machines, either the jukeboxes or arcade games or whatever, when those vendors came, they would take all the quarters, but they'd leave all the red quarters because they knew those quarters belonged to the house or something like that. So it had nothing to do with the Rebel restaurant, but I do remember whenever you played video games at the Rebel restaurant, they had those red painted quarters there. That was just a little side story there. But I remember being at the Rebel for a birthday party. I must have been like 10 years old, 9 or 10 years old. I was there for either a birthday party or one of those kind of end of the season banquets for CYO basketball, something like that. But I remember they had a few video games there at the restaurant, and one of the video games was Mortal Kombat. And whoa, I was really, really, really blown. I always use this expression blown away all the time, but I really was blown away when I first saw this video game, this arcade game, Mortal Kombat. And the first thing that you really noticed about it was how real the characters looked in the game. And it was like kind of scary. It was kind of a scary game. It was kind of ominous, it was intense. And obviously there was a lot of controversy surrounding it because of the violence and the gore and everything. I think the first time I played Mortal Kombat, I was Scorpion, and that was always my go-to character. I don't know, for some reason I gravitated to Scorpion, and I quickly learned that really cheap move of his where you throw the rope spear, and you say, "Get over here," or "Come here, get over here, come here," or whatever it is. All right, that's a horrible impression, and then you drag your opponent to you, and then you do that uppercut. And you could kind of do that over and over again if you're really cheap. And I was kind of cheap. So I did that all the time because I usually was very successful in beating people when I used those moves. So yeah, Scorpion was always my go-to character. However, when I started going to the Dream Machine and playing Mortal Kombat there, I encountered much better players at Dream Machine. And, everybody from as far north as Boston, from as far west as Worcester, from as far south as Providence, probably went to the Dream Machine because it was the closest arcade, within, I don't know, a 26-mile radius or something. So you had the best of the best from the Boston area and from even the Rhode Island, Providence area coming to this arcade. So, when I went and played Mortal Kombat for the first time, I was Scorpion. I thought I was a big hotshot, but I got absolutely destroyed by this dude. I think he played as Raiden, and he did all those crazy Superman moves. And, Raiden would always, he'd say that weird thing that nobody knew what he was saying. He was like, "Your mother's from LA." Everybody thought he was saying, "Your mother's from LA," but it would sound like, "Your mother's from LA. Your mother's from LA." Oh, that's really bad. That's a bad impression. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm ashamed. Your mother's from LA. Your mother's from LA. Hush a little LA. Your mother's from LA. Okay. So yeah, so that was Raiden. He said, "Your mother's from LA." But anyway, this kid destroyed me with Raiden, and I was Scorpion per usual. I couldn't get off any of those rope spear moves, and yes, he beat me. The only time I actually was good playing Mortal Kombat was when, maybe it was like the middle of a Tuesday in the middle of the summer, and some little kid came in with his grandmother and wanted to play a round of Mortal Kombat, and then I would kind of be like, "Oh yeah, little kid, yeah, play me." And I'd absolutely destroy him and I guess feel good about myself, and that would be a little boost to my ego or something like that. But there was a huge long line there most of the time for Mortal Kombat. The proper video arcade etiquette was you'd wait in that line and then you put your quarter up on the little lip in front of the video game cabinet screen there, and that would basically mean that you were on deck to play. So basically, if there were two people playing each other, the winner would keep playing, but the loser would let the next person in line play the game. So if you're really good at Mortal Kombat, you could probably play for a long time just off one quarter. And if there was a long line behind you and you just beat everybody, then you could just be playing nonstop forever. But I was always impressed watching the people at Mortal Kombat and how good they were. They somehow mastered all those finishing moves, those fatalities, and that was really I never was very I don't know, I may have figured out Scorpion's finishing move at some point where he takes off his mask and breathes fire and burns his opponent. Toasty! Which is actually a pretty good fatality. But yeah, everybody else seemed to learn those finishing moves seemingly easily because there was a lot of complex button combinations and joystick shifting involved. And you had to be like a certain distance from your opponent in order to pull off those finishing moves. So I was always impressed that the kids seemed to memorize how to do that. But yeah, looking back on Mortal Kombat now, I actually looked up some YouTube videos of all the finishing moves. And they are pretty gory. I mean, they're pretty intense. I can see why there was some controversy surrounding the game at the time. I don't want to be a square, but when you watch the finishing moves, first of all, Kano's finishing move, he pulls out the heart of his opponent and then he holds the heart up with his hand and then the heart beats. It goes boom, 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 boom. And, all the blood is falling and gushing and, there's guts falling to the ground and making squishy sounds too. So it is pretty gory. And then there's this kind of intense music that goes along with the fatality that it's like right after they do the fatality, there's some intense, ominous music. And it's like really, it gives you the impression that something really bad just happened. It's kind of, I don't know, it gives you the willies a little bit. And then there was Johnny Cage's finishing move. He does the uppercut in your head, basically. He basically punches your head off your neck. Then there was Sub-Zero's finishing move. He rips the head off his opponent and, you have the spine dangling. And again, the blood is falling and the guts are falling to the ground and making squishy noises. Sonya did her little kiss of death move where she blew a little kiss of fire and then her opponent would burn. Toasty! Raiden threw a lightning bolt at his opponent's head and then the head exploded. So pretty gory moves. And again, with all the sound effects, it's pretty intense. Now, I do remember back in the 90s that a lot of parent groups and a lot of religious figures and politicians kind of they made Mortal Kombat the scapegoat for basically all of society's problems, especially problems with the youth. I don't know if that's fair. I'm a little older now, so I'm probably a little more concerned about how media influences the youth, but I'm not really sure violence in video games is to blame. I do, however, sometimes get concerned about music because even looking back at some of the music now from like, I don't know, I recently listened to Snoop Dogg's album Doggy Style and then Dr. Dre's album Chronic. And I used to love that music when I was growing up in the 1990s. But if you ever listen to like Doggy Style or Chronic, there's some really dark, there's some dark lyrics on there, like dark sexual type of lyrics. And I don't want to sound like a square here, but I don't think that's like the best thing for, teenagers to be listening to. And I'm sure it's even worse today. Like, I don't know about Lil Uzi's music. Then you have Ice Spice's music, and her lyrics are pretty horrible and dark as well. I would say you should go look up one of her songs on YouTube, but actually I don't think that's a good idea because it's pretty dark stuff. So I'm in my early 40s now, and I'm a little bit more concerned about media's influence on the youth. I don't think like Mortal Kombat is like nothing now. I mean, at the time, I think they blamed Mortal Kombat for Columbine and movies like The Matrix and stuff like that, but I don't know if that was fair. I have this theory about narcissism. I think narcissism is our biggest problem in society right now, and I have this theory about movies and narcissism and the basic structure of stories in the movies is very narcissistic, in my opinion, because you usually have this story about a central main character who's the one, like you have Neo in The Matrix, or you have Frodo Baggins in The Lord of the Rings, and John Connor in Terminator, and Leonidas from 300, Jake from Avatar, even Buffy from Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I don't know, any kind of superhero movie these days, you kind of have the one, the chosen one type of a character. And then everybody else are supporting players. And so the implication is that that central main character is the center of their universe kind of, and everybody else is, kind of like planets revolving around the sun. You probably think I'm completely out of my mind right now, but here's what I'm basically saying. There's a central character known as the one, and everybody else revolves around that other character. So that's kind of a narcissistic story right there, because it's like one character is the center of the universe and everybody else is supporting that other character. So that's kind of promoting narcissism in our culture. And I feel like that's why we have a narcissism problem, or at least one of the reasons why we have a narcissism problem. I think that might be more of a concern to us. Even it's a little bit more complex. It's easier to blame a video game like Mortal Kombat or, music with bad lyrics for society's problems, but maybe there's more complex issues at play. That's what I'm trying to get at here. But yeah, once Mortal Kombat came out for Super Nintendo and then the Sega Genesis, they watered down the violence quite a bit in those games. The Super Nintendo version didn't have any blood in it at all, and the finishing moves weren't as intense, if I remember correctly. In Sega Genesis, there was still some blood and the finishing moves, but because it was 16-bit graphics, it didn't really look as real, so the violence wasn't as intense. But anyway, yeah, so Mortal Kombat was definitely one of the more popular games at Dream Machine. Eventually, I got sick of waiting in line to play Mortal Kombat, so I decided to check out some of the other games in Dream Machine. And one of those other games was Terminator 2, the arcade game, put out by Midway in 1991. And that quickly became a go-to video game of mine. I thought it was a really cool game. It had that little Uzi that you use to shoot the screen with. The other cool thing about the game was that it had human voices talking to you a lot of the time. Basically, Arnold Schwarzenegger would tell you, nice shot. Let's go. Excellent. Okay, that's a horrible impression of Arnold Schwarzenegger. But that was very impressive at the time to have real human voices, just like with Mortal Kombat, where it was very impressive to see characters that looked human. And I think they actually shot real human beings in order to create those digital characters. They kind of combined real video footage to create those characters in Mortal Kombat. That's why they looked so real. But it was definitely impressive when there were human voices in video games at that time in the early 90s. So that was definitely something that stood out to me about Terminator 2, the arcade game. But yeah, it had that Uzi that you held on to and you shot at the screen. Had really nice sound effects, especially when you shot the endoskeletons of the Terminators. There'd be that like metallic dinging sound from shooting them. Ding, 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 ding. But I wasn't very good at that game. I would only probably play it for a quarter or two. I might continue here or there. It was difficult to get really beyond the first level in that game. It was a hard game, but it was very fun to play. And that was always kind of the first game I would play whenever I went to Dream Machine. At some point, Terminator 2, the arcade game, was released for Game Gear. And in 1992, maybe, I don't know, when I was in the 5th or 6th grade, I got Game Gear for my birthday, and then I got Terminator 2, the arcade game, for Game Gear. The graphics in that game were not as good as the arcade game version. And it was actually awkward playing the game because you had to use the cross pad to aim, and it wasn't as easy aiming as it was with the arcade game when you had the actual gun to aim with. But it was a very fun game. Again, the graphics were very like 8 to 16. I don't know, but the Sega Game Gear, I think, were basically like 8-bit graphics, a little better maybe. So it was a lot of fun to play, but I still couldn't get really beyond that first level or much further into the game. I think I got a little further into the Game Gear game because I had more time to focus on it and play it. And of course, you didn't have to keep on feeding the machine quarters. Getting back to the Dream Machine, after I would play Terminator 2, the arcade game, I'd usually go over to play Lethal Enforcers, released by Konami in 1992. And that was another shoot-'em-up game. It's a little less intense than the Terminator 2 game. I just remember you'd have about 6 bullets in your gun. You'd have to shoot some bank robbers, and then the screen would constantly tell you to reload. No, hold on, let me try that again. Reload, reload, reload. Something like that. I don't have the intonation right. Reload! And then you'd have to shoot away at the screen to reload your gun. But the thing with that game is you kind of had to avoid shooting all the civilians who told you to, don't shoot! But the bank robbers would yell at you, eat lead, copper. After Lethal Enforcers, I would usually go on over to the X-Men video game. And X-Men was released by Konami in 1992 as well. And this was a really cool video game cabinet. It was actually referred to as a deluxe cabinet because it had basically 2 monitors in it. And you could play with up to 6 players on this huge, massive cabinet. Really cool video game, the X-Men, where you play as one of the 6 X-Men and basically save the world from the evil Magneto. It's a side-scrolling beat-em-up game, and I would always play as the character Colossus. And this goes back to what I was doing at the beginning of this podcast episode. Colossus had this special mutant power move where he would kind of grunt in a constipated-like fashion. He would go, "Ugh!" And then there would be this kind of wave of atomic flatulence or something that would clear the screen of bad guys. But here's the rub about that mutant power. It would actually take up 3 points of your energy, so you had to use that sparingly. But if you found yourself just overwhelmed by bad guys and you wanted to clear the screen, you could just use that mutant power. Colossus would go, "Oh!" and clear the screen of bad guys. I know Wolverine was really a good character to be, and also Cyclops was good too. He had some sort of laser power. Wolverine had, his long fingers, fingernail things, metallic fingers, those claws, I guess is the name. So yeah, X-Men, really awesome game on that deluxe cabinet. after the X-Men, I would go over to the Simpsons video arcade game. This was released also by Konami in 1991, I think. Yeah, The Simpsons was released by Konami in 1991. This, like the X-Men, was another side-scrolling beat-em-up game. You could play with up to 4 players. You could either be Marge, Bart, Homer, or Lisa. And each character had a special weapon that they used. Bart had the skateboard, Lisa had jump rope, Marge had a vacuum cleaner. And, actually, Homer, I don't think had anything. He just was kind of tougher than the rest, I think. Nobody ever really used Homer. I think Marge was the best character to play as because that vacuum cleaner really did a good job beating up the bad guys. And I think the storyline involved Waylon Smithers kidnapping Maggie, baby Maggie, after robbing a jewelry store or something. And then the Simpsons would have to rescue Maggie from Waylon Smithers and Mr. Burns. And in the process, they'd have to beat up a bunch of Waylon Smithers' henchmen. A lot of good sound effects in this game, and I think it also had the voices, which was always, especially in the early 1990s, to hear the voices of The Simpsons really screamed, this is a good machine, if you heard human voices, or in this case, The Simpsons voices. After playing The Simpsons, I would then go a couple cabinets over and play NBA Jam, and that was released by Midway in 1993, actually. And Midway was the same company that released Mortal Kombat. And just like Mortal Kombat, NBA Jam had a lot of players that looked very human. So that was kind of the goal of Midway, to make video games look a lot more real. They were kind of trying to steer video games in the direction of virtual reality at that time. Virtual reality was kind of a big dream of everybody's back in the 1990s. So they were definitely trying to go in that direction with realism. So NBA Jam was a ton of fun to play. Again, it had those human voices. There was that voice on the machine that, said things like, boom shakalaka, if you got a slam dunk. And from downtown, if you were taking a three-pointer, and if you were doing really well and sinking a lot of baskets, the voice would then say, he's heating up. So yeah, NBA Jam, really fun game. Hey, Dirt Bike Mike, coming in hot. How are you, Dirt Bike Mike? I'm really good. I'm looking for some good books to read. Have you considered a book by Matt Burns? Did you know his books are on Amazon.com now? Many of them cost only 99 cents. At most, you're only going to pay about $3. I think some of his books would be right up your alley. I must say, I'm intrigued. Yes. It's been decided. I'm going to read a book by Matt Burns. So all the games I've been talking about so far have been the kind of arcade games where you put a quarter into the machine and you play for basically the sake of having fun. However, there were other games at the Dream Machine that you didn't just play for fun, you actually played for a little something else, and that something else was tickets. There was a basketball game at the Dream Machine where you would try to sink as many hoops as you could within about a 30-second time period or something like that. There was also this game called Feed Big Bertha, and with Big Bertha, the point of the game was to throw as many balls into the mouth of this morbidly obese woman named Bertha. She was basically the fat lady from the circus. That was the concept of the game. And she'd have this little cloth skirt that would blow up every once in a while from a little burst of wind, and there would be a circus whistle. And you'd try to throw as many balls into her mouth as possible. And if you hit her tonsils in the way back of the mouth, you actually got more points. But that was a game where you got a lot of tickets if you were good at it. There was a lot of skee ball at Dream Machine, and you would win a lot of tickets from skee ball if you were good at that. There was obviously whack-a-mole, and there was a game where you threw balls at Humpty Dumpty's. There was also this game called Wheel 'em In.
Wheel 'em in! Come on over and wheel 'em in!
And with Wheel 'em In, it was almost like a casino-type game. You put a quarter in a slot, and the quarter would roll down this little ramp thing and land on a conveyor belt device where there were several strips on this conveyor belt, different colors, and each strip had a different ticket amount assigned to it. So you would try to roll the quarter onto the strip that had the biggest ticket amount. The quarter would roll down that little ramp thing and then fall flat. And if it fell flat directly on one of the strips, you would win the amount of tickets that the strip was worth. That was Wheel 'em In.
Come on over and wheel 'em in!
There were also a lot of pinball machines at Dream Machine. And the pinball machine I remember playing the most, or really the only pinball machine I played at Dream Machine, was the Addams Family pinball machine. And the Addams Family pinball machine was extremely fun. I didn't really know what the heck I was doing with it. I just kept pressing the buttons like a maniac, hoping the pinball would stay in play. I was never that good at it, but if you were a good pinball player, I'm pretty sure the Addams Family pinball machine was a fun machine to play with. But with the pinball games, it wasn't about getting tickets. I don't think you got any tickets from the pinball games. It was all about getting high scores and beating each other's high scores. It was all about the points. So at the end of your Dream Machine arcade visit, you would basically take all of your tickets and then proceed to the front counter of the Dream Machine. And at the front counter, there would be various prizes that you could get with your tickets. So there would be small items like Tootsie Rolls. They cost about 20 or 30 tickets, something like that. But there would also be big ticket items that cost about 1,000 tickets or more. And that would be like a bicycle maybe, or a scooter. Maybe 100 tickets would get you a roll of bubble tape gum. So it was kind of a ripoff. I mean, for the amount of money that you spent playing all the video games, it wasn't really cost effective to use your tickets to buy these items. You know, it would have been cheaper to go to a store and buy a roll of bubble tape gum. But obviously it was about fun, you know. It was about taking those tickets that you earned by working so hard playing those games and getting a prize with those tickets. That was the fun of it. One other thing I remember about the Dream Machine is that they had these tokens there, and these tokens basically acted as quarters. It'd be Dream Machine tokens. I think I still actually have some of these tokens, you know, that I never used in the past. I think I kept some as souvenirs. But the tokens, I'm not really sure. I think maybe there was a machine at the arcade that you could feed in your money, like $1 or $5, $20, whatever. And maybe the machine would give you tokens in return to use at the arcade. Although I feel like that machine gave you quarters. I think what actually may have happened is if you went to the Dream Machine for a birthday party, they would give you a bunch of tokens to start out with, or there'd be a certain amount of tokens that everybody at the birthday party could use to play the video games with. But you couldn't use those tokens, obviously, anywhere else except at the arcade. I remember in the late 1990s, I actually had a friend who worked at the Dream Machine, and he used to give us unlimited amounts of tokens to play the video games with. That was like a dream come true to have somebody working there. And yeah, we could just go there. My friends and I could go there and play all the video games we wanted at the Dream Machine, completely free of cost. He'd also give us an unlimited amount of candy too, which was the ticket prize candy. I remember walking out of the arcade with candy by the bags full. So Obviously, as the 1990s progressed and the 2000s came about, home video game systems were becoming better and better. So this is why video arcade attendance definitely waned over the years, and more video arcades closed their doors. But somehow the Dream Machine in the Walpole Mall managed to survive, and it still exists today. I stopped going to the Dream Machine basically in the late 1990s. A few years ago, I actually went to the Dream Machine to revisit it. A friend of mine went there with her son, and I met up with them there and played a few games there. And that was actually a lot of fun. I thought the Dream Machine had really gone downhill over the years, but I was actually surprised to see that not only did they have a lot of the same games that they had from the 1990s, but they actually had a lot of old school video games there too. Arcade games like, I don't know, the Pac-Man type stuff, like stuff from maybe the late 1970s or early 1980s, that era. Centipede and Pac-Man, maybe Donkey Kong. I'm not sure if they had Donkey Kong, but games of that kind there. So it's definitely still alive and kicking. It's definitely a cool arcade to go to. However, I did notice that a new video arcade opened not far from Dream Machine now in Norwood, Massachusetts. There's this new really cool looking video arcade that opened with a bunch of old school video arcade games. And that is one of those arcades that you pay a flat fee to go into. It's about $20, and then you can play as many video games as you want. That seems to be what a lot of these new video arcades are using as a business model, this flat fee approach. So as far as I know, at least when I went to the Dream Machine a few years back, it was still the same where, you feed the quarters into the machine. There's no flat fee. That may have changed recently, but as far as I know, they don't use that flat fee business model yet. I think they make a good amount of money off birthday parties there. I know there's a lot of people that bring their kids there for birthday parties. So I think they're able to survive off birthday parties, probably alone. But yeah, I think it still gets pretty good business, even though it's in a mall that most people consider to be a dead mall, at least on the inside. I will always have very fond memories of the Dream Machine. I love it very much, and I wish it the best. All right, thank you very much for listening to that episode of the Burnzo Cast. That was episode number 7. I can't believe I've done 7 of these episodes so far. So I hope you enjoyed that. If you did enjoy this episode, I do have an article called I Dream of Dream Machine on my website, theburnzodiaries.com. So you can Google I Dream of Dream Machine by Matt Burns, and you'll find that article. Most of what I covered in this podcast is in that article. So if you want to read that, just for the heck of it, you can read that. It's also available as an ebook on Amazon.com. So, all right, thanks a lot. Thanks for tuning in again to the Burnzo Cast. More episodes to come, and can you do me a flavor and just be well? Till next time. Hey everyone, if you want to check out my writing, be sure to check out my blog, theburnzodiaries.com. And also check out my books at Amazon.com. I have many novels there, including Johnny Cruise, Supermarket Zombies, Weird Monster, The Woman and the Dragon, and I also have many Kindle singles there and other books, including memoirs. So be sure to check out my blog, theburnzodiaries.com, and also my books at Amazon.com.